Welcome to Perfectville, your first place podcast for your Miami Dolphins, part of the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag. I am a very sweaty Sam Marcoux, and he is the two-time Hall of Famer. Of course, I'm talking about the good doctor himself, Dr. Christopher Cullen. Doctor, how in the hell are you, my friend?
Good. I'm enjoying the roulette of every episode, doing it from a different place, and today being the sauna for you. So that's great.
Yeah, I've been trying to build this studio out permanently for a very long time, and we're getting close, but I'm noticing there's a little bit of moisture in the air, to say the least here. But let's stop talking about the sweaty me, and let's talk about the fact that Miami's hero, Greg Camarillo, is here officially, the third member of the band. Greg, how in the hell are you? Enough with Chris. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's honored to be joining you guys. I've always wanted to be in a sauna with three guys talking Dolphins football. So there you go. This is as close as they can get.
This is not the first time you have been in a huddle, sweaty, with two other big men around you, talking strategy, talking Dolphins ball. So you were right at home here in the town of Perfectville. Welcome, Greg, officially part of the Perfectville crew and officially a part of what we're doing here in the town of Perfectville. And what we're doing, before anything else, is talking about Bet Online. That's right. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. That's right. Football is back. We're into week 2 of preseason. College football is right around the corner. I'm excited. From the preseason NFL to college kickoff, Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on the winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. $300,000, Chris. I can build another sauna. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today and use the promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V, and get in on the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. And let's start the show with what everybody is talking about. The big story, both Chris and Greg, I need your guys' opinion on what is happening with the Miami Dolphins. Week 1 of preseason is done. We're well into week 2 of preseason. They had joint practice today against the Washington Commanders. But leading up to that, I was on a plane to San Antonio, Texas earlier this week. I'm on that plane, and I see the notification. Jaelan Phillips, the big dog, is back. He's activated off the PUP. He's practicing that day. He looks amazing. He looks like he was never injured. And, oh, by the way, Jaylen Waddle comes back to practice. Oh, by the way, Jordan Poyer comes back to practice. Oh, by the way, Eric Uzunkama, who we've all had high hopes for, but injuries have hampered his career up to this point. He rubs some dirt on it. He gets back to practice. Terron Armstead, the stud left tackle, he comes back to practice. Starters everywhere coming back to practice. Joint practice today against the Washington Commanders. We've got a game this weekend where the starters will be playing. There's so much to talk about here in week 2, Greg. What do you make of the news of Jaelan Phillips coming off PUP seemingly early, like a superhuman, and joining his defenders against those Commanders this week in practice?
It's just a big boost for the team, big boost for fans. Big boost for the team. I mean, he is a talent that has to be out there on the field. And so for him to come back gives a boost mid-camp when things just look rough. And you're looking at a player, that middle portion right there, you're just stuck in the tunnel. You can't see where you started. You can't see where the end is. But something like that can bring you that little spark that can get the team going, especially when you're starting these joint practices.
When you think about, was there ever a player that you played with when they came back, you knew they were coming back, or maybe it was a surprise they came back early? When they came back and they suited up and they were ready to play, whether it was regular season, preseason, just in practice, was there a player that you went, okay, we are ready to go. We are not losing. We are on the right trajectory. So-and-so is back. Is there ever a player like that for you?
I mean, there was huge excitement, and that was around Ricky Williams making his comeback after, he had been suspended, injured, all kind of things. He'd been on such a journey. And then there was it was also in the middle of our terrible season that Ricky is rejoining the Dolphins. And it was like that little bit of hope that we had in that season. Because I think at that point, oh man, we were 0 something at that point. That's all I remember. But you start getting more men, you start getting more cameras around. There's just a little more pep and pizzazz we need during that season. I mean, that's a very different situation than Jaelan Phillips. But when you get a big name player back, it just makes everything a little bit brighter.
Chris, what did you make of the news of Jaelan Phillips and him aside? Because I think he was the biggest return this week. I mean, some of those other guys I mentioned, we knew were coming back, within the next week or two. But outside of Jaelan Phillips, well, first of all, talk to me about Jaelan Phillips and what that meant for you as a fan, somebody who played defense in college and is watching this. But who else on that list of players that I talked about that came back that made you fist pump like Tony Sperano back in the day?
So Phillips for me, just super, like you said, superhuman. It's like to come back from such a devastating injury like that was. I mean, seeing that scene of it popping under his sock and just like coiling up, it's just as a coach now and a former player, that's the hardest thing to get through for a player is a long-term injury because you just got to be not just the physical part of it, the mental side of it. And I loved how Jalen Ramsey last year did the whole 1-0 versus the day, 2-0 versus the second day, 3-0. I've actually used that for injured kids that I coach now currently to just win each day. And it's a grind. It's a grind. And Greg, I know you can talk to this too. Coming back, Jaelan Phillips, like anything that you lose for a while that you had, you take it for granted. And he's going to come back, in my opinion, with a bigger chip on his shoulder because of that. And we're going to get probably the best version of Jaelan Phillips that we've seen in a Miami Dolphins uniform, which is scary for offenses across the league that we're playing. But aside from him, I'd say Poyer, because I want to see the new guy get some more time, chemistry with the defense, hear his voice a little bit since he's just joining us. So I think getting him back, obviously Waddle and Armstead's amazing, but we are expecting it. Poyer back is big, especially middle of camp.
You know, I also have to give a shout out to Jaelan Phillips, who was asked about who he talked to and who helped him in terms of other players during this time. And remember Aaron Rodgers, as you guys know, Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles last year in the first week of the game or first week of the season. He reached out to Jaelan Phillips almost immediately after Jalen hurt himself against those very Jets later in the season. And Jaelan Phillips, whether it's true or not, or if he just is that media savvy, talked about, yeah, Aaron Rodgers reached out to me, but his situation is a little bit different than mine. It was odd. He even said like the word odd. And I think he was just throwing some shade at the Jets quarterback more than anything else. But I think a little bit of a Easter egg for us Dolphins fans who are consuming all this content and saw him throw a little bit of shade towards Aaron Rodgers here during his epic comeback this week. Let's talk about a little bit about what's going on, what I heard and what I saw at camp today, because it dovetails nicely as to what we saw last week against the Atlanta Falcons and those joint practices. Greg, you hit it on the head in your last appearance here. You almost get more out of these joint practices than you do these preseason games, and you can start to see a thread. And it's something that Chris and I talked about with Jordan Poyer a couple of weeks back. Jordan Poyer came to this team from the hated, dreaded, awful Buffalo Bills, and he talked about the fact that the Miami Dolphins were always considered a little bit soft. And if we can jump on them early, we can defeat them, and they're no longer a threat. Well, you move forward here about a month and a half later. Jalen Ramsey has had a huddle with this team. Tyreek Hill's talking about how we need to be better. Tua Tagovailoa is talking, it's Super Bowl or bust. If you can't help me, get out of the way. And then we see something against Atlanta Falcons that I haven't seen in a while from the Miami Dolphins, and that is a couple of fights, a couple of arguments, a couple of disagreements, a kerfluffle. And then today, I don't know if you saw this yet, Greg, but everyone, just about everyone on the Miami Dolphins team are starting fights, throwing helmets, getting into trouble, digging in against the Washington Commanders. How hype is this team to change the narrative that they are soft, that they're an easy win, or you can push them around? I mean, is this all hype, or is this a new attitude that is ingrained and rooted with this Miami Dolphins team here in 2024?
All right, Sam, we got to start with the fact that these fights are replacing football. So there's a joint practice, you're competing, but you can't tackle someone. You can't just lay somebody out as hard as you can. So that's what this fight is. These are fights of the aggression of football that you can't take out on a practice field, which is good because when you start doing that, then it becomes a preseason game and then people start getting hurt, and that's what we're trying to avoid. But the fights give you that little bit of outlet, of that aggression. You know, the guy pissed you off the rep before. Well, let's just start a fight instead. And it's all good, man. It's all fun. And it's a mindset. And I have no problem with it. As if I was a teammate out there, I would cheer it on to a point where we still need to be productive. Like, don't waste my time. But go ahead, sock a guy in the face real quick and let's get this thing moving.
Well, let me ask you this, Greg. You got people like Liam Eichenberg, right guard, starting guard for the Miami Dolphins. He's getting it in there, or left guard, as it were. Robert Jones, all these guys, the big guys, they're fighting with the defensive tackles and defensive line. Are you running in? Are you running in and breaking this up? Or no?
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. I'm gonna go run for some support. I'll bring your towel to you. I'll bring some water for you. I'm not fighting those big guys, man. You're trying to stay healthy. You're trying to stay in this league as long as you can. For a little guy, a sub 200-pound guy, to go in there with the big fellas, it's just not a good career decision.
It really isn't a career move, as you say. But this is also what Greg Camarillo was talking about the last time he was on the show, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a wide receiver and you're on the middle or back half of that wide receiving core, you got to play a lot of positions. And sometimes you got to go get a towel or a water for the big guys when they're fighting. Chris, the other thing that came out here that I saw today was on the far field, Mr. Odell Beckham Jr. We're going to talk a little bit more about him later in this episode. But we had an appearance from OBJ, preferably and presumably wide receiver 3 on this team. Hasn't practiced, hasn't really participated in team drills, but he was out there today warming up, exercising. Looks like he's getting a little bit closer to being an official member of the Miami Dolphins. What did you make of the news of Odell Beckham Jr. gracing us with his presence today?
Yeah, it's about time. We need to get him out there, man. Like the season is very fastly approaching. I have like pinpoints in the calendar in my brain, and my son's first high school football game is next Friday. And it's like, that means the Dolphin season starting soon. Like it's almost here. Like there's a lot to say, and I would love Greg to touch on this too. With a new receiver joining a team, like, are they working without us seeing it? Like him and Tua, are they getting chemistry together? Because there's so many little things. Like, I'm going to turn at the 10-yard mark or at this hash mark if the corner's on this hip, or if the safety's taking a step down, I'm going to change my route and do this. So many little things you have to work out, and there's only time, and we are losing it. So we'd love to see, Greg, especially as a receiver, your thought on how much and how important it is with Odell missing time, and how important that is.
Yeah, it's not a huge concern up to this point. Okay. The one concern is that chemistry, and they have to be communicating, at least discussing what the plays look like, where you would be. But you have to run full speed routes to get chemistry with a quarterback in full speed. That's the only way to get it. The one thing that has zero concern is Odell's ability to go run a route and get open. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with Bill Parcells when I was entering my 8th year in the NFL, and I was a free agent, and I wasn't getting any traction. So I called him, one, because I figured he's connected with everyone, and I wanted him to connect me with the team and get me going. But 2, to get his advice. And one of the things he said to me, and not what I was looking for at this moment, he said, Greg, you're going to be able to run a slant route and get open into your 40s. But that doesn't mean a team is going to sign you. And so I look at Odell Beckham, he will always find a way to get open. For 5 years from now, he could get out there and find a way to get open because of his athleticism, because of his talent, because of his knowledge as a veteran. So I don't worry about that part. It'll take a couple weeks to get clicking, but there's minimal concern for him not having taken full speed reps at this point.
I'd also like to point out that Greg Camarillo just name dropped Bill Parcells on his very first official episode.
Podcast, right? We got to drop the GOAT in there.
Yeah, Sam. If you didn't start talking immediately, the first thing I was going to say is, "Wow, that's why this is such an upgrade." We can't say I've got Bill Belichick's number in my cell phone and called him for advice. So that's pretty freaking epic.
No, I better than Bill Belichick. He was talking about Bill Parcells. I mean, the best I can do is like Bill, my neighbor down the street. I was talking to him about why I wasn't signed, and he told me I sweat too much. So, also good advice.
Got good advice too.
Yeah, it's not what I wanted to hear either, Greg, but it is what it is, as they say. So let's talk a little bit about this game, because Mike McDaniel came out before week 1 and said, you're really not going to see anything deviate from the script that we've had the last couple of seasons, meaning the starters aren't really going to play week 1. And in fact, 40 players for the Miami Dolphins did not suit up against those Atlanta Falcons. We still won, by the way. Not that it matters, but we won. He did already come out and say week 2, preseason 2 against these Washington Commanders, you will see most of the starters, or at least some of these starters, play. So I'm going to go to Greg first and then to Chris. Who should be playing? Who doesn't need to play, and why? Give me 2 names, and then Chris, you give me 2 more. Greg, you up first. Who of these starters on the Miami Dolphins should be playing in this game, and why?
Tua should be playing, and I'm talking one series, just because it's good for the team to see the leader prepare for a game, to watch him on game day, to watch how he works, how he prepares, how he warms up, how he gets out there, and then for him to just get that feeling, because it's when you're playing, your nerves start kicking in. I don't mean nervous. I just mean like you get excited. You get that game day feel. So it's important to get that feeling again. It's important for his team to see him out there. a guy that doesn't need to play, I could name a few. Tyreek Hill doesn't need to play. Jaylen Waddle doesn't need to play, and Terron Armstead don't need to play because we know that when they get out there, they have experience with the team, they have experience with the quarterback. They'll be fine. But I do want to see Tua get out there, especially after this new huge contract, and just play 10 plays, and show us you're ready.
Like that, Chris. How about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna go away from Tua just because you make it interesting. But I'm gonna go ahead and say Mostert. I don't need to see him play. Running back is a great position, but it's one of those things where it's really hard. You can't really say you're building chemistry with your line, this and that. I mean, really, if the hole's open or it's not, like, and that's extremely dumbing down what they do. But with his injury history as well, I don't need. Even though I like seeing Jalen Wright play, man, he was fun to watch last week. But he does not need to play. Jalen Ramsey doesn't need to play. I don't think, coming off an injury, just leave him out. But somebody I really do want to see play is Javon Holland. I want to see Chop Robinson play too. Yeah. It was weird. It was odd having him and Kamara out the first preseason game when they're rookies. I get it, but also I would love to see them, like Greg said, get the juices flowing, see that jump, see that get off. Let them see how fast the game really is. I watched Hard Knocks last night from Tuesday, and Eberflus was having the conversation with Caleb Williams about, your guys are faster, their defense is faster. It just everyone's faster in the NFL. So those guys with the good get off at Penn State, albeit they're playing Big Ten schools, but this is the NFL. So those linemen have a bigger punch. They're quicker feet. So they need to get some reps too.
I know this isn't a Bears podcast, but Caleb Williams looked good, guys. That guy is ready. I got my eyes on him.
Well, this is a Miami Dolphins podcast, but we do have the okayest fantasy league ever with some of the citizens of Perfectville here. And you heard it from Greg Camarillo, guys, a guy who's caught touchdown balls from some of the greats, including Cleo Lemon for the Miami Dolphins. Saying Caleb Williams is maybe a guy you want to get in your old fantasy football league. I'm going to agree. I'm going to disagree with Greg on Terron Armstead, and here's why. If Tua Tagovailoa is playing one series, I want Terron Armstead playing one series at least. When Tua goes, Terron can carry him out, and they can go sit on the sidelines and share a smoothie. But I want the big man with the big punch, protecting the little man, throwing the ball from his left hand, which I want to talk to you about here, Greg. You and I were having this conversation via email. But there was an article in The Athletic, and Chris, I don't think you had a chance to read it, or maybe you did, but it talked about Mike McDaniel sitting down with Steve Young, Bay Area great Steve Young, about how Steve Young told Mike McDaniel, when you get a hold of Tua Tagovailoa, don't look at him being left-handed as a disadvantage or some sort of thing that you have to correct or work around. Look at it as an advantage. And Mike McDaniel, when he famously cut up those 700 plays or whatever it was to show Tua Tagovailoa you can play at this level, he even admitted in this article he was getting lost and distracted by him being left-handed. And he started thinking to himself, Chris, well, if I'm getting lost and I'm studying this right now, the defense is going to get confused. So he started looking at this from Steve Young's point of view of, well, his back is now turned to a cornerback or one side of the defense that's used to being able to see the entire side of that quarterback. And maybe they have a tell when they pat the ball, shake, move their shoulders, whatever it is. So there's an advantage in Tua Tagovailoa being left-handed, which we've talked about, and everyone has ad nauseum, simply for the defense to get maybe half a second delay from that defender to where now Tyreek Hill is wide open. He can throw to that spot with confidence because he knows he's got the guy flat-footed for half a second or else. But Greg, you said something back to me via email, which I hope you repeat if you remember what you said, because you said there is a difference. It is a challenge catching a ball from a left-handed quarterback, which goes back to OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., needing to get that chemistry like you talked about with Tua. But you had mentioned that there's one thing worse than a left-handed quarterback, and that is what?
A left-footed punter. Miserable, absolutely miserable trying to catch a punt from a left-footed punter. It sounds so simple. The ball spins the other way, big deal. But it messes with everything your brain has ever taught you. And the one example I'm thinking of right now is this Zoom camera that's looking at me. When you try to center yourself, it's the opposite. And it always takes a little bit to figure out which way am I going. And I was driving the other day, and this is the closest analogy I can get because it's hard to just wrap you around. I mean, there's a ball flying at you. You put your hands up and catch it. It sounds so simple. if you're driving on a one-way street, we all parallel park on the right side, right? We know what to do. You know exactly where to turn the wheel, where to turn it back, where to look over your shoulder. If you're on a one-way street and you happen to parallel park on the left side, everything is the opposite. You are closer to the curb. You are turning the wheel a different way. And you know how to do it, and it feels awkward, but it's just not the same. It requires more thinking. And that's what's the hard part is the key to playing good football is not thinking. You have done it enough. You know your routes, you know your plays, you just react. If you have to think about that ball coming out, it's just one more thing to worry about. And eventually you get used to it. Your starting quarterback's left-handed. You spend years with him, it'll be fine. But for OBJ, a new guy catching that left-handed ball, man, it drives you insane. And so, hey, I'm not going to tell Steve Young he's wrong. He's in the Hall of Fame. I'm not. Steve Young, hey, I grew up watching you. You're amazing. But, man, punts and receiving the ball from a left-hander, left footer is miserable.
Let me ask you this. I didn't think about it. A little sidebar here. You grew up in Northern California. You went to high school here. You obviously went to college here at Stanford. Did you grow up a 49ers fan? Was that
I did. I watched a lot of Steve Young slinging that ball left-handed.
Cannot believe I'm talking to you. I grew up in Northern California. I am not a Niners fan, as you know, obviously. But having to sit here during the Joe Montana, Steve Young era, and then into Jeff Garcia, Terrell Owens, and now being who they are right now, with the whole Brandon Ayuk is just everywhere. I can't go anywhere in the Bay Area without Brandon Ayuk hopping up on the news here. I cannot stand the Niners are one of the worst teams in terms of hatred for me because I grew up in the shadow of this and I've had to deal with it. All my friends are Niner fans except for the bad ones, and then they're Raider fans. But anyway, I digress. Chris, did you ever play in high school or college against a left-handed quarterback? Or I'm sure you weren't receiving punts, knowing that you played linebacker. But did you ever play against a left-handed quarterback, and did that mess you up like Greg was talking about from defensive?
No, but I'll come into a different way of thinking on this too. So my son plays rugby also, and the rugby ball is a bigger ball, and it's got more air in it. Obviously, it's a bigger ball. No laces, anything like that, but they kick a lot in rugby, and I'm out there coaching and helping, and on the field, these kids kick this ball in the air, and that ball is just moving in the air. There's barely any spiral on it at all. That's one of the hardest things to catch I've ever seen. Like just any little difference. It is. Yeah. It's pretty much like a knuckleball. And in rugby, the rules are if you knock it forward, like if you drop it, it's a turnover. So like Americans watch the sport and they're like, "Why do they kick so much?" It's like, well, risk reward. If you kick it 60 yards, you don't have to tackle anybody, and he drops that ball. That's their ball there. So seeing that, and then also, Greg, I went to Ireland last year, and I had to drive on the left side of the road.
Oh man!
And my seat was on the right side. Like you said, I've been doing it since I'm 16 years old. I know how to steer a wheel, push the gas, hit the brakes.
Yeah,
everything was different. You get to the roundabout, and you start at the left instead of the right. The weirdest thing, and this sounds so ridiculous, right? We do it a million times a day.
Yep.
Turning right at an intersection was a mental just blow up because I had to pass the cars and then go to the road, which is just I know how to do it. It just was different. So your brain just overthinks everything.
So Chris, what the article mentioned, almost exactly like what you were mentioning, is how the linemen then have to adjust. So you take a left tackle who's normally a blindside tackle, moves to the right, so then they can still be a blindside tackle, but literally has to get with the strength coach to re-strengthen other legs and work on flexibility because the one leg that's been pushing is not the pushing leg anymore. And so all those little things, I don't even think I'd attempt to drive on the left side. Like a lot of tackles wouldn't even attempt to switch to the other side. I'm glad they look at it as an advantage, but it is a huge adjustment.
Yeah, it has to be. And, another side note here, because I know Chris went over there as a rugby dad. His son was playing internationally over there. And, Chris, as I am known to do occasionally, visited a few pubs, right? Just some historical reference points. And he found out that, let's just play a game, Chris. Chris already knows the answer. Let's go to Greg. Greg, in your opinion, in your best guess, what is the number one selling beer? And you don't have to overthink this, to your point, in Ireland. What do you think is the number one selling beer in Ireland?
I'm guessing Guinness.
Ding, ding, ding. Greg is now 1-for-1. Old habits here. All right. This is where it gets a little tougher. What do you think the number two selling beer in all of Ireland is, Greg?
Oh man, I'm gonna go with something just amazingly American, like a Bud Light.
Oh man, he's so close.
You're not far off. You're not far off. I'll
So-
give you an addendum, one extra guess given that clue.
Is it a Budweiser?
Coors Light. So
Coors Light.
Coors Light is their
Which
number
could not be
2
more
selling
different
beer.
than a Guinness.
Yeah, and it blows my mind that it's Coors Light. Something out of Golden, Colorado is being tapped in the green hills of Ireland, Chris. Chris told me that little tidbit. That was amazing to me.
Yeah, I was at a million pubs, like so many pubs. I'm Irish in ancestry. And I'm like looking, and it's just Guinness, Smittix, Five Lamps, all these different just Irish beers. And then there's the Rocky Mountains, and which is right behind me. Yeah. And I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, I finally went to a bartender, and it's getting ordered constantly. I'm like watching this beer get poured. So I go to the bartender in Galway, and I'm like, what's up with the Coors Light, dude? Guys get made fun of in America for that. It's water, it's whatever. And he's like, oh, mate, that's the second most changed keg we have here at the bar behind Guinness. And I'm like, why? What's up with it? And it's all like 15, 18 to 28, 35-year-old. They're volume drinkers. They're going to stay at the pub for hours. You're not going to drink 30 Guinnesses, but shit, they can put down 30 Coors Light. Yeah, staying hydrated. So yeah, the Coors Light, that's the seller, man. It's crazy.
While we're on the topic, I took a honeymoon to Australia and figured I'd get a Foster's Australian for beer. And they said, we don't drink that piss. I was like, oh, wow, okay.
That's Australians, man. That's a country that was born out of prisoners, right? So they're not drinking that piss. They're making their own in the friendly confines of Australia.
I'm sure they called you a C word too.
Probably did, but this is a family show, so we're gonna move on. All right, well let's move on to predictions that no one's going to care about shortly after we say it here. But I looked on BetOnline, the fabulous people at betonline.ag, and the Miami Dolphins are favored by 5 points against the Washington Commanders this weekend. The over-under is 38. Let's go to Chris first, and then to Greg, and then myself. Chris, what's your prediction? What is the final score of this? What could change the landscape of football forever? Week 2 of preseason 2024, Miami Dolphins, Washington Commanders. What's the end result?
I mean, if Tua only plays a series and we continue getting the same quarterback play that we got week 1, I'm thinking maybe 17-14, the Dolphins win. I mean, very low scoring. I'd take the under on the bet. I would never bet on a preseason game. That's absurd.
I would. Greg?
Good move, Chris. Yeah, if Tua only plays one series, the offense looked rough. And it makes sense. If there's 40 guys that don't suit up, like you're not playing with your best. And the other team gifted us a few where snaps that quarterbacks don't want to dive on, and just here you go. Here's the ball at the 5. I see Jaden Daniels putting up some numbers just because he's fun to watch. And in the preseason, you don't game plan, so it's
right.
Like in a regular season game against a running quarterback, you're going to put some things in place to make sure he doesn't light you up. In the preseason, you're going to put 1 or 2 small things, but you're not going to show your cards. So I could see them putting up some points. Let's go with 24-14. Unfortunately, Dolphins on the short side of that.
Going 1-1 here in preseason. I happen to agree. I mean, I think this Washington Commanders team, they're going through a rebuild, quite frankly. They got a rookie first-round quarterback. They've got a new coach. They've got a lot of new players. They have something to prove. Jaden Daniels looked amazing week 1, especially for a rookie. In practice today, I think at some point they were doing red zone drills, and he scored 5 touchdowns in a row against the Miami Dolphins in those red zone drills. I think there was a couple against Cater Kahu and a couple against Kendall Fuller, who actually was wearing the orange jersey today, which I have to say, look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. If you're the best player, you get the auxiliary, you get to wear the orange jersey. But isn't it a little suspicious that Kendall Fuller, who was on the Washington Commanders last season, were participating against them and practicing against them today, is all of a sudden the guy who was the best player in practice yesterday? Don't you think there's a little Bill Belichick-esque? I know you could probably call Bill Belichick right after Bill Parcells, Greg, but don't you think there's a little bit of a mind effing going on with Mike McDaniel, knowing that Kendall's going up against his old team? Or my
absolutely. That's coaches save that for strategic play. That's there's some politics behind there, and I have no problem with that. You got to know how to maneuver your chess pieces.
Yeah. Well, he did end the practice with an interception of Jaden Daniels. So if nothing else, He did get himself the last big play of the day. But it just struck to me a little bit like Mike McDaniel's trying to put a little bit of makeup on the ex-girlfriend to make her look that much hotter when you know you're going to run into her at the reunion. Right, Chris?
Oh, yeah. That's why you always have like the former player as the captain at coin toss when he plays his former team. I used to coach youth football, and I had this hammer I gave out, and I told all the kids I got it when I went to a camp, and Bill Belichick gave it to me, and I gave the hammer, and they all believe me, by the way. It's not true. Dumb kids. But I would like give a hammer out to a kid that had the best practice. It was always a kid that needed it, like a kid that just made a tackle who wasn't keeping his head up all week. And my son came home and he's like, how come I never win the hammer? And I'm like, dude, it's not for you. It's if I gave it to the best player every time, you and 3 other kids would get it every single time.
Yeah.
It's about giving it to the kid that like needs motivation or needs to get picked up. So yeah, Kendall Fuller in the jersey is literally like me giving a hammer to 9-year-old kids. It's just that spunk factor that you know the other team is looking across, and it fully has meaning.
I got it 21-10. Take the under. Miami Dolphins 21, Commanders 10. We're going to cover as well. So win some free money on Bet Online.
There you go.
All right, we're going to be joined soon by Kyle Ulbrich, the punter in question for the Miami Dolphins. But before we do that, we have a treat. As longtime listeners, citizens of Perfectville, you guys know that there is a little thing that we like to do during the season called Elite Tweet or Delete Tweet. We're going to go ahead and pull that forward right now. We're going to introduce Greg, our hero, Miami's hero, to Elite Tweet, Delete Tweet. Here are the rules, Greg. I'm going to be pulling tweets that have happened over the last week. We're going to talk about whether or not it is a good tweet, aka an elite tweet, or if it's a bad tweet and it should be deleted immediately and delete your account. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
All right, the first one comes from Keith McClendon at Keith McClendon, and this actually happened yesterday as of this recording. Is at OBJ pulling off another Will Fuller, or is he really actually injured? Elite tweet or delete tweet? Greg, you go first.
Oh, damn, I got to pick one. We'll go with elite tweet. It's fine. You can question him for not being out there. No problem. Not bad enough to delete it.
Chris, what about you?
Delete tweet. Delete that shit. McClendon, what's his name? I've never heard of this guy in my life. What the hell do you do for a living? Are you playing football? You're talking to a professional athlete that is doing more in a week than you've done activity-wise for a year. Delete that shit and delete your account and go run a lap, boy.
Ooh, well, there you go. Right there. The coach coming out, bringing the hammer, dropping it on Keith's head there. So my initial reaction is a delete tweet here, because why are you calling out OBJ? To Chris's point, you aren't doing anything. You're a keyboard warrior. You're sitting on your couch. You're looking like me, sweating up a storm going, hey, OBJ is stealing money from the Miami Dolphins. However, I have to say, it's an elite tweet, and here's why. Because the response, it's the reaction to the action that makes this an elite tweet, because immediately OBJ might not be healthy enough to go out there and run routes, but he's healthy enough to clap back, because the response from Odell Beckham Jr. at OBJ says, move in silence. I'll let y'all know next time I got to take a piss. I didn't know I was not that important to inform you of everything of what's going on. Elite tweet or delete tweet, Chris Colin, OBJ, clap it back at a no-name, Keith McClendon.
Oh, elite tweet. Like, look what I just said, man. Yeah, let him know. What we're going to tell you when I got to take a piss? Relax, dude. The season's not even happening. We watched that game last week, and Odell Beckham's fine. He's going to be just fine. Like Greg said, he can get open for the next 5 years. Get off his sack, dude. Like, good Lord.
Greg, what do you think? Elite tweet?
It's harsh. It is, Chris. Wow, it's harsh out there.
Oh, I come for it. Elite tweet.
Yeah, you
tweet,
do.
Baby.
And you know what? That's what Twitter's all about, man. Is everyone's allowed to do that, and that's why I'm gonna go with elite tweet. I just like the fact that he responded. Like, that's random fan puts out a tweet. OBJ responds. Everybody wins in that situation. I love it.
You know that guy's adrenaline went through the roof when he saw a notification. Odell Beckham responded. He's like, "Oh."
Would you have responded, Greg, if that was you? If they were coming after you, would you have responded, or would you have taken it offline and just said, you know what, I'll let my actions speak for me?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have. But I played in a different day, and OBJ just was sitting there on board, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna throw some fire at this guy. And that's the beautiful thing about social media is that 20 years ago, that never would have happened. 15 years ago, never would have happened. But now there's this interaction, and that's what's so great about social media is you throw a random tweet out there. Hey, you might get a response. You might get ignored. You might get a response. We're going to go double elite tweet on that.
Double elite tweet. I agree. A triple elite tweet on that one. And like you said, random tweets. This is a Miami Dolphins podcast. However, we got a couple more here. And this one is not Miami Dolphins related, but Miami Dolphins adjacent. This comes from Mike K at Mike_E_K. Too many underscores, Mike. However, he says, I've seen married couples who hold each other less than the Jets DBs hold Panthers wide receivers in this practice. Chris, you are a Panthers hater living in North Carolina. Elite tweet, delete tweet from Mr. Mike K regarding the Jets DBs and their holding issues against the Panthers in practice today.
Yeah, elite tweet. Anytime you can bring up something that compares like that, that's hilarious. Like I love it. That's elite tweet for sure.
Greg?
Elite tweet. We all know exactly that feeling, and now he puts it into football. That's high level comparison right there.
It's really well done. Plus, he's blasting the Jets, which I'm always going to have a soft spot in my heart for. We got two more, and then we're going to bring on our guest for this episode. But this comes from Brian Batko at Brian Batko. Again, not a Miami Dolphins tweet, but one that I thought was interesting. He's at the Steelers practice today, and he said Mitch Trubisky just completed a pass to George Pickens. George Pickens was on the sideline. Elite tweet, delete tweet, Greg.
That's the type of training camp updates that I like to see because there's not so much meaningful football going on. So let's have our fun. That's high level elite tweet.
What about you, Chris?
Oh, agreed. Yeah, high level for sure. I love it.
That's if Mitch Trubisky is taking snaps, George Pickens better be on the sidelines. That's all I'm saying. Otherwise, you got a problem in Pittsburgh. All right, last one. And this comes from Dolfreaky, fan of the year for the Miami Dolphins at Dolfreaky. Richmond Webb belongs in the Hall of Fame. And then she's tagged just about everybody on planet Earth to rally around her. Chris Colin, elite tweet, delete tweet on our guest, multiple time guest, Mr. Richmond Webb, being a member of the Hall of Fame.
So speaking of Greg saying, access and things like that, Richmond Webb's literally my friend on Facebook. Yeah. Like this guy's incredible. Like he's just so chill. He just tweets pictures of his him grilling hot dogs and stuff. And all he did was just, protect the blind side of one of the greatest quarterbacks in history. He absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I like that she's picking up where me and you left off with Zach Thomas with our campaign to get him in the Hall of Fame. Richmond Webb absolutely deserves it. I think that's a very thankless job sometimes, especially back in the 80s and 90s. Offensive lineman. The grind was crazy in practice. In games, you're going against Bruce Smith twice a year, every year for a decade. I mean, like, come on, that guy needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Greg, what say you?
So it's just so hard with offensive linemen because the stats aren't there. But looking at his Wikipedia, 2-time All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. Like my guy was dominating for a high level. So yes, it is. Yeah. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Not my favorite tweet. I like making fun of Mitch Trubisky better.
Yes, sir.
I do too. I'm going to go delete tweet. I'm going to shock the world and say this is a delete tweet, not because Richmond Webb doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. He absolutely does. He's in the Ring of Honor. He was on the All-Decades team. If you're a starter on the All-Decades team, I don't know how you're not in the Hall of Fame. So let's put that aside. I'm going to say delete tweet because of the contents of this. I talked about the fact that she tagged everybody, and I love me some Dolfreaky. However, she did not tag me, Chris. She did not tag you. She did not tag Greg. And here's the problem with that. You alluded to it, and we all know it to be true. We started a campaign to get Zach Thomas into the Hall of Fame, and we were so annoying to the people in the Hall of Fame that when Zach Thomas made it, they brought up to him, we're so glad you made it so that these guys will leave us the F alone. It was so well received that Zach Thomas, you've seen the text, Chris, was texting his friends that we were friends with that Perfectville is awesome because of how annoying we were for about a year. We can do the same thing with Richmond Webb. The people in Canton don't want us to do it. But why would you not get us involved? We were the ones that helped campaign and made everybody annoying with Canton and the NFL Hall of Fame because of what we were able to do with Zach Thomas. Tag us. We'll make it happen again. We can be annoying. We like being annoying. So delete tweet from Dolfreaky simply because we weren't invited to the party.